So we don't have any time problems. So that's one thing. Okay. So tell the rest of those students who are not here, first, to be on time, and second, to come to the lectures. Yes, because I see not everybody is here. Yes, because the point is we will have to write a final report, and the attendance is one of the let's say the attendance of the students, of course, is one of the issues which is calculated into the whole program. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so IT, can you start? Yes, so you switch it on. So yes.
I've got a question. To arrive in time is a little difficult because of the bus. We don't know in which direction we have to drive with the bus. This morning we got in the bus 116.
Okay, that we'll have to talk about this. There are buses, so we'll have to talk about that after the lecture. Okay? Because it's not far. Today.
16 and
Okay, so for tomorrow we'll try to arrange everything, yes? Okay, so we're starting with the second lecture. May I now introduce Dr. Laura Herta from Babes-Bolyai University, and we'll talk today about the civil society in Romania.
Thank you. Hello everyone. I'm glad to be here among you this week. I would just like to mention a few words about myself. I'm teaching in Cluj, in this university, but I'm usually teaching state failure and intervention, so civil society in Romania, even though Romanian is a bit of an overstretch for me. But I tried my best with this presentation. And in case you have any questions in the end, please feel free to raise them. See how I do. So, we will first start by explaining what is the structure of our presentation and what are the research questions that we decided upon at the very beginning. So, we are interested in some theoretical approaches. Am I loud enough? No. I will try. So, we will start with a theoretical approach. And of course we chose constructivism because we believe this is the most comprehensive theory, social theory, which could explain transformation in civil society in Romania. So then the first question is why constructivism strengthens the understanding of civil society development in Romania, of course. Secondly, we are interested in finding out how civil society in Romania was reconstituted. And here we have we will decide whether this was constituted after 1999 and what were the remains that actually meant a reconstitution of society. Because there's a very fragile and not full of content historical overview of civil society in Romania and active participation, especially during communist times. Next, we will want to see how did civil society in Romania evolve, of course, and we will have a brief overview of the relation between state and civil society. And finally, we will be interested in knowing how civil society organizations in Romania have been affected by the crisis. By the end of the presentation, we will have answers to these questions, hopefully. We'll see how convincing I am, depending on your questions. So we start by the first part, theoretical approaches, and the main question here is how is civil society in Romania reconstituted? Now, generally, of course, citizen involvement in civil society, but also organizations, membership in associations, and collective action are expected to lead to at least two significant pro-democratic effects on participants and the environment in which they act. These two effects are the following. First of all, through group activity, a process of social learning, and already I'm introducing a constructivist term. So social learning takes place, which enhances attitudes, knowledge, and skills on which democratic politics are based. Secondly, civic activism also impacts positively on the public arena, because, as we can see on the slide, associations support the social infrastructure of public spheres that develop agendas, test ideas, and of course involve deliberations, providing us voice. One political scientist, Mark Warren, posited that a robust associational life may enable more democracy in more domains of life while forming and deepening the capacities and dispositions of democratic citizens. So the concept of association thus connects the normative questions that define politics. What should we do? And also, how should we live? To the social and linguistic media that enable these questions to be asked, discussed, and of course, there then decided. So, a constructivist approach, as I announced from the very beginning. Drawing thus on the social constructivist approach, we will argue that social learning, age structure, mutual constitution, shared ideas, and finally society as social construct are all key elements in understanding the transformation of Romanian society after 1989. Now, there are two sociologists, Berger and Luhmann, and well, they are considered the precursors of social constructivist approaches. Now, in their renowned work by now, the social construction of reality, they posit that by interaction, individuals create social words through symbolic and linguistic activities in order to give coherence to human existence. Therefore, society is not a noun system, but rather it is a construct comprising ideas, symbols, meanings, which all of them both constrain and enable human action. In their approach, Berger and Luhmann are actually basing their construction of reality by naming three main important phases. So, the first one, wherein society is seen as a human construct, which means that because in order for individuals to make coherence of the world around them, they want to actually resort to formation of behavioral pattern and standardized forms of action. So this means that in everyday life activity, social interaction, there is a process of typification. These are the typificatory schemes which the two authors operate, through which individuals perceive, understand, and confront each other. A second phase is the one wherein society presents itself as objectified reality, comprising routinized fixed patterns. As you will see that routinization is a key concept for the two authors, Berger and Luhmann. So, after individuals create social life, the latter appears as real, objective structure based on a continuum of social facts. Society then, as objective reality, implies a social order based on institutionalization and legitimization. The third phase is based on society as subjective reality, and here we are interested in internalization. After the individuals created an objective structure, they proceed by internalizing it, and by socialization, they turn this objective reality into an integral part of their subjective conscious. Herein, people are products or constructs of reality. So this is one approach in constructivist theories. We go to another one, to another precursor of social approaches, or social constructivist approaches. And that is Anthony Giddens and his theory of structuration, which is present, of course, in his renowned book, The Constitution of Society. The sociologist insists or shows the necessity to equally consider the effects or influence of structure upon the agents and vice versa. Agency thus refers to the capacity of individuals to engage in social action as purposive, intentional action. Purposive, dynamic intentional actors, or human agents, and such capacity generates decisive consequences for the world around them. So, when approaching the agency structure problematic, Anthony Giddens believes that structure is not a reality per se, but only insofar as it is instantiated through actions and practices of human agents. At the same time, though, the actions and practices of human agents, by aggregation and by recurrence, shape, maintain, or reproduce the structure that had made their actions possible in the first place. So the reality, yes, just for last thing, the reality formation, and in the end also identity formation, is an ongoing process. The key concept within the theory of structuration is, as I already mentioned, routinization. Since routine is believed by Giddens and other sociologists, is believed to be the basis element of everyday activity. The term thus captures the routinized character of social life. And we will see how this has a relevance in post-communist Romania. How was civil society in Romania reconstituted is one of our questions. Well, we have other political scientists, such as Babes-Bolyai, a Romanian one, who believes that in Romania, the communist regime discouraged or tried to control any form of collective action. So, as a result, the society became extremely atomized, with islands of sociability barely exceeding the family level. People had few opportunities for pursuing their own interests through collective action, so citizens were in the end rarely motivated to act toward the realization of the common good. The transition to post-communist, increasingly robust civil society in Romania could have never been miraculous or sudden. Instead, it needed the reconstitution of purposive agents, and now we are only dealing with constructivist key terms. So, it needed the reconstitution of purposive agents in contrast to submissive, repressed Romanian citizens under communism. It needed gradually increased levels of association and socialization, the reconstitution of routine in everyday activity. They also needed the agents, and in our case, these are the Romanian citizens, needed to regain trust in fellow citizens, in state institutions, and in the potential strength of aggregate civic interest and collective action. According to other authors, also discussing the nature of communist regime in Romania, believe that the suppression of free speech and association under communism and the slow progress in creating organizations after the fall of communism in a climate of distrust, suspicion of formal institutions, and economic collapse all led to people being concerned with a struggle for existence rather than participating in public life. And this is how we could explain such a slow development of civil society in Romania in the 1990s. And such a, for a long time, lack of trust that, first of all, group mobilization is possible. It has an impact on anything, on the agenda, on the political agenda. So, at this point, it is our contention that the post-communist civic engagement needed, first of all, going back to the three phases discussed by Herta and Luckmann, a new phase in which already installed behavioral patterns and standardized forms of actions needed to be transformed. Secondly, another gradual process of typification, and this is the word used by Herta and Luckmann, in everyday social interaction in which Romanian citizens perceived, understood, and confronted each other in a post-totalitarian, modifiable, in transition, mindset. Structure, problematic, of the communist regime, and this duality, in order to use Anthony Giddens' term, has been for many years indicated for a dormant, suppressed, and controlled civic society. The party state created and maintained the overwhelming majority of social and professional organizations. We go back to the political scientist, Romanian political scientist, Gabriel Bădescu, who showed that all existing associations owed their missions, organizational structures, and financial support to the former regime. Most of these organizations were not in a position to serve as effective mobilizing agents. Using a constructivist vocabulary, we might say that new shared ideas were in order so that a new objectified reality could be created and later on internalized by agents, that is, Romanian citizens. So, one drawback was duly noted by other scholars. Since the fall of communism, many of the Western institutions trying to promote urbanization had used the development of the NGO sector as an important tool. However, this was an export of democracy, and you will see what consequences it had upon the Romanian civil society and the decrease in local-based initiatives. So, just a second, they produced organizations that are more reliant on outside sources of funding and support than their Western counterparts. Of course, there are unintended negative influence. There is an unintended negative influence on NGOs and civil society development in Romania, that is. post-communist associations that depended on Western funds or often incorporated distinctly foreign organization initiatives which may have little applicability to the domestic context. The fact is that association leaders and activists were often more beholden to their funders than to the people they are trying to engage and inspire. So many NGOs have been created in response to available Western funding and less to address specific local needs. Despite such infusion of organizations and funding, a large number of these organizations were often sponsored from abroad, reflecting external concerns rather than indigenous or local-based interests. It's like saying that they were top-down in character rather than membership-driven, which meant that they did not succeed in abolishing a legacy of distrust in public organizations. According to the studies and reports and surveys of Gabriel Băsescu and Eric Muslander, there is a tendency in Romania for the civil society organizations to face mainly negative attitudes throughout the transition period. For instance, in the May 2001 Romanian Public Opinion Barometer survey, the respondents were asked to state their level of confidence in several institutions and types of organizations in Romania. Now, in the list of 16 such institutions, NGOs were placed in the 14th position. That is, that 73.8%, yes, 74.8% of respondents expressed low confidence in them. Now we go back to a public figure, that is Luisa Popescu. She's the former advisor of the Romanian president in charge of the relations with the NGOs. And she was active and in office in the period between 1996 and 2000, and she had this sharp formulation at some point. There are three kinds of civil society in Romania: the professionals, the enthusiasts, all fine so far, but also the profiteers. And we will see how this was the case with Romania. Now, Sandra Păun, who actually is the one who initiated Soros Foundation in Romania, and she has also an extensive journalist career. She worked for the Newsweek and for the CNN. She has a doctoral PhD in civil society in Romania. She actually drawed on this, on this statement of a public servant, and she said that there are three types then of NGOs, organizations. First of all, the Western funded and trained professional NGOs who are active primarily in human rights, democracy promotion, and social services. This group was initially formed mostly of very young people with limited prior professional experience who were trained by Western NGOs in the early 1990s to be program officers. This group was managerially well-trained, versatile, and politically neutral. So, mobility among such NGOs is high. Secondly, the enthusiastic but underfunded local groups, which best correspond to the convenient idea of self-organized voluntary organizations, are to be found mostly in the provinces where Western support did not reach immediately in the early 1990s in Romania. Secondly, we have the so-called profiteers. The profiteers are those shrewd entrepreneurs who took advantage of tax loopholes benefiting from non-profit organizations in order to disguise profit-making import-export business as NGOs. This was a fact in Romania in the early 1990s. Although with the adoption of the new law in 2000, the practice decreased a bit, such trafficking has given a bad name to the non-governmental sector overall in Romania. It is difficult to estimate exactly how many fraudulent NGOs were in Romania, but some statistics are worrisome. Some locals are said to have as many as 20 NGOs registered in their name. Of course, they are not active, but they are used for other purposes. These so-called foundations, because you will see we have associations and foundations in Romania. These so-called foundations facilitating thriving black market businesses, such as the market for imported cars, for instance, which profitably use the tax loopholes granted to NGOs. Therefore, such negative perceptions stem in part from the belief that NGO leaders have exploited the public purse for their own advantage and that the parties use them for, among other things, raising campaign funds illegally. So, this being said, we go back to the studies of Sandra Kalon. She said that the use of legal loopholes prior to 2000 may explain why civil society, a term that is positively acknowledged, or at least neutral in other parts of the world, in Romania has acquired an initial negative connotation that is still difficult to shed off. So based on these three types of NGOs, Sandra Kalon established a conceptual classification in time. So she says that there are three different stages of civil society development. Now, the first one is the initial period of enthusiasm. A second period is the one of consolidation and professionalization. And thirdly, from Romania's EU accession in 2007, we see a turning point in her words. A new stage of development emerges, and the contours of which have yet to be defined. But the question remains, I must say, whether civil society will in the future, this was also an expectation immediately after 2007. But the question remains whether civil society will be consolidated in future years after the turning point of EU accession, and if not, whether the number of NGOs and their power will further decline. So, we have several causes or explanations. Old-fashioned generic legislation dating from 1924. Imagine, 1924. The so-called Legea Mărzescu for the Romanian students. Never repealed prior to 2000, but also never used during communist regime. Secondly, we have pioneering militant spirit initially in opposition to the established political power. Then, we have the availability of relative plentiful funding, especially for democratic consolidation domains. Human rights, minority protection, civic education. This is all belonging to the first enthusiastic phase. And finally, at that point, which was not the same in future years, there was a limited bureaucracy, even for the main donors such as Soros, USA, and even FARE grants, has relatively easy access to funding. The second so-called professional period from 2001 up to 2007 also features certain elements, or displays certain features. First of all, there is a huge change in legislation. This is actually the only time in 2000, after 10 years of post-communist transition, that in Romania, well, a body, a corpus of laws regulating this activity was in the end finalized. So, we have changes in legislation that more sharply distinguished the associative form, for instance, the distinction between foundations, associations, union, clubs, and so on and so forth. Another feature is a more selective funding opportunity and more limited. Then again, increased bureaucracy in accessing funds. The emergence of a new generation of civil society who were called, and also this is mentioned in different texts and different surveys, they were called the technocrats. They were less militant, more businesslike, and trained by Western NGOs. Another feature or characteristic refers to the professionalization of project management as a skill transferred or exported by Western donors. And finally, the period starting in 2007, this is the turning point, also has several specific characteristics, namely the withdrawal of traditional donors, that is USA, FARE, the Swiss. Secondly, the availability of new funding sources. Here maybe the Romanian students might remember that in 2003, the so-called 1%, which is deductible from tax incomes, was actually released. But this was then changed to 2% in 2005. So, what else? Fragmented civil society leadership, with leaders increasingly splitting along political lines. Now, what we want to do next is to have a brief overview of the relation between state and civil society. Here we also have different subcategories and periods. For instance, here we rely on the report of the Foundation for the Development of Civil Society, which started its initiative and all the programs in 1994 in Romania. And they actually distinguish among different periods. The first period is the one between 1990 and 92. And this is the non-governmental sector is militant, is protesting on the streets, and is completely absent from governing programs. Now, the reaction was that the politicians referred to members of civil society in this period as hooligans, which indicates, first of all, a lack of comprehension for mobilization, and secondly, also a lack of understanding the basic act of protest. A second period, during 1992 and 1996, in this period the non-governmental sector is placed somehow in opposition to the government. Herein, using certain speech acts, again we go to constructivist approaches and the importance of speech acts, using action driven by the support of foreign assisting programs for democracy and eased by the frailty of recently recreated political parties. In all of these circumstances, the non-governmental organizations appear as elements of opposition. We go then to a second phase, that is throughout the 1996 and 2000 period. This was also a dramatic change in regime turnover. This is when the Democratic Convention gained the elections. More enthusiasm was present, So in this period, the non-governmental sector was gradually consolidated, and the model of partnership relations between state and the non-governmental sector was shaped gradually. Within the social realm in this period, specific objectives in relation to which the interaction with civil society was redefined. For instance, the establishment of minimal social indicators for determining the life cost in agreement with trade unions, with retired people's organizations, as to enhance proper wages, pensions, allowances, and social security benefits. With respect to social security system, on the other hand, key goals for state-civil society relations aim at stimulating participation of civil society structure to social activities and the institutionalization of forms of volunteering. We go on to the fourth period, 2000-2002. Here we have the NGOs who were perceived as promoters of good governance and of promoting EU accession. But one main objective was consultation with NGOs interested in drafting legislation initiatives. This is the outward of more involvement in activities that result in legislation modification. So, with respect to European funds, the goal centered on improvement of the institutional and legal framework. And finally, we have the last two periods identified by such a report. The period between 2004 and 2008 signified European integration and the needed legal regulation regarding the redirection of this 2% which I already mentioned, which has a huge impact on NGOs funding, you will see later, instead of one introduced in 2003. And what is relevant for the period after 2008 is that the relation between state and civil society is characterized by crisis and deadlock. In the following part, we will try to analyze the types of Romanian NGOs or civil society organization, distinguishing among the two. And we start by saying that civil society constitutes a third sector, this is already known of course, existing alongside and interacting with the state and market. Or in other words, existing alongside with the public sector and the business sector. According to the United Nations Development Program, civil society organizations are non-state actors whose aim is neither to generate profits nor to seek governing power. So civil society organizations unite people to advance shared goals and interests. The UNDP collaborates with CSOs whose goals, values and development philosophies accord with its own. So usually the United Nations Development Program is preferring, has a tendency to work with a wide variety of NGOs, but actually, or CSOs, but actually they are more interested in the NGOs that have the capacity to handle large development programs. Recently, however, increasingly working with a wide variety of CSOs, civil organizations, is also to be visible, including grassroots organizations, faith-based organizations, and indigenous peoples organizations. Going even deeper to the nature of Romanian civil society, first of all, we might say that this is divided into four categories. You will see that the last two are not so relevant. We have the associations, we have the foundation, we have the federations, and the unions. Now, there is a lot of data from the Ministry of Justice, but we don't trust it so much because it's not complete. So this is why we always want to counterbalance it to other reports. For instance, the pro-democracy, this is an association in Romania, fighting for democracy promotion, of course, and their report is called Civic Europe, Civic Romania. So they found 36,000 and something associations, representing 68% of the total civil society, 16,000 foundations, only 30%, and some federations, well, representing only 1%, and some trade unions, again, only 1%. Some of them are existing only on paper. This is another issue. Some of them are not even active. Some used to be actually laundering money or actually helping out some business. But others do not have regular systematic activities. And still, what we could observe is an increasing tendency in NGO creation, and this reflects an exponential increase of associational life in Romania. If we want to have a look at this period of 15 years, 1990 and 2005, the percentages were distributed as follows. There were 45% association, 40% foundations, and 14% were other types. This is another source, because other sources go back and say associations now add up or amount to 70%, and foundations to 30%. So, I'm not sure whether this is boring for you, but I just wanted to explain what an association is and what a foundation is. They have different legal statuses. Associations are constituted by 3 or more individuals who place together knowledge and their working contribution for the achievements of general interest activities of certain groups. So there is an understanding when creating an association that there is no right for financial contribution restitution. The main difference actually between associations and foundation is that the former have members, while the latter have founders. That is why foundations are non-governmental entities that are established as non-profit corporations or charitable trusts with the main purpose of making grants to unrelated organizations, institutions, and individuals for scientific education, cultural, and other charitable purposes. Now, federations and unions, briefly, they are merely a combination of other associations and foundations. For instance, unions represent the joining together of several organizations and social groups whose aim is to defend or claim a common right. Okay. Advocacy, of course, is known to anyone, but I want to emphasize the role of advocacy and its pitfalls in the case of Romania. In Romania, for instance, advocacy activities are not properly regulated by the state. This is the perception of respondents in a study that indicated that almost 60% of those who actively and directly participate in civil society activities believe that the Romanian legislation does not support advocacy activities performed by the civil society organizations. Now, how to classify the civil society organizations? There are so many subgroups. First of all, we have the religious organizations, trade unions, civic and social organizations, service providers in the fields of education, research and training organizations, the so-called think tanks, non-profit media organizations, women associations, students, or youth clubs. And the list will go on, you will see, but we will try to simplify because we will not focus on them. Organizations for socially and economically marginalized groups, professional and business associations, like the Chambers of Commerce, ethnic-based organizations, environmental organizations, cultural organizations, finally sport and recreation organizations, which are among the very few that were not reinvented, but they were actually mere a transformation of previous clubs and sport organizations. There are also networks, federations, social movements. However, most studies on civil society in Romania tend to only focus on NGOs, mainly on civic and social type organizations, cultural and recreation ones, social service providers, and environment organizations. Now, there is a